In 2023, one company did something that no one in Silicon Valley had the guts to do. They took a frontier AI model, the kind of thing that costs hundreds of millions of dollars to train on, and gave it away for free to everyone. Developers could download it, run it on their own hardware, modify it, build businesses on top of it. No API key, no subscription, no permissions needed. Within 2 years, it had been downloaded over 1 billion times, more than any AI model in history. And the company? Meta. Yeah, that one. And the model? Llama. And for a brief, shiny moment, Meta was the most beloved company in AI. But then they blew it away in a single weekend. To understand how Meta became the gold standard of AI, you have to understand the landscape in early 2023. ChatGPT had just exploded. OpenAI was the hottest company on the planet, and the message from every major AI lab was the same. These models are too powerful, too dangerous, and too important to let people run on their own hardware. So you could use them through an API, you could pay for access, but you couldn't see the weights. You couldn't look under the hood, essentially. You couldn't actually own the entire thing. Even if you wanted to, these models would cost, well, hundreds of thousands of dollars to run, just on a single server. But this is surprisingly where Meta comes in. In February of 2023, they released the original Llama paper. The key finding was almost absurd. A 13 billion parameter model, relatively small, outperformed GPT-3, which had 175 billion parameters. 13 billion beating 175 billion. On most benchmarks, crazy. The best part of it is that it was trained entirely on public data. No secret proprietary data sets, no backroom deals with publishers or even their own catalog of data, which you would think they would maybe do. Just data available to the public, run through enough compute. And at first, they didn't release the weights publicly. It was gated behind a research access form. But within a week, the weights leaked onto 4chan. The entire model torrented across the internet. And usually this is when alarms start going off. But instead, something incredible happened. Developers started fine-tuning it. Stanford built Alpaca on top of it. Projects like Vicuna and GPT-for-all appeared overnight, essentially. And the local Llama subreddit became one of the most active communities in tech. So for the first time ever, regular developers, not just researchers at billion-dollar labs, could run a real language model on their own consumer hardware. Llama didn't just create a model, it essentially created a movement. And Meta leaned into it heavy. In July of 2023, Meta released Llama 2. This time, fully open. No leaked weights, no gated access, just here. Use it. A proper commercial license. The models were 7 billion to 70 billion parameters, so it could run on lower-end consumer hardware or higher-grade machines. Meta partnered with Microsoft, AWS, and others to host it everywhere. But the benchmarks were also impressive. Llama 2 70B was close to matching in performance with GPT 3.5 in the benchmarks. The smaller models were constantly having fine-tunes coming out that focused on specific skill sets. But there was some skepticism. You see, Llama 2 had a license that wasn't open source in the traditional sense. It restricted use of companies with 700 million plus monthly active users, and you would have to agree with their acceptable use policy. But the skepticism was brief, as the dawn of local LLMs was about to begin. In April of 2024, Llama 3 dropped and showed exceptional performance for the amount of parameters they were in. 8 billion was a strong model to run on consumer-grade devices, and the 70B model would close the gap between the open source models and the state-of-the-art proprietary ones at the time as well. But it was Meta's next version of Llama that would change everything. In July of 2024, Llama 3.1 was released. The 405 billion parameter model. the first time an open weight model was genuinely competing with the best closed models from OpenAI and Google. And this wasn't just good for open source. It, genuinely speaking, was actually good. Downloads passed 650 million. Developers, startups, governments, and enterprises were all building on top of Llama. It became the default foundation for anyone who wanted to run AI without being locked into a specific ecosystem. And their pitch was simple. You want to build on AI? You don't need to pay us. You don't need to ask permission, just take it and build, unless you have 700 million users, which you wouldn't even be asking these questions to begin with. For a company that had spent years being the villain of tech with Cambridge Analytica, the metaverse money pit, congressional hearings, Llama was the best PR Meta had gotten in a decade, if not of all time. And all they had to do was just keep shipping good models. But in early 2025, something happened that nobody at Meta, or really on the whole internet, saw coming. DeepSeek, a Chinese AI lab that most people in Silicon Valley had never even heard of. They dropped a model, DeepSeek v3, that matched and in some cases exceeded Llama's performance. But surprisingly, that wasn't the major problem. It was how they did it that sent Meta and basically everyone into a spiral. DeepSeek v3 used a smarter mixture of experts architecture with a routing approach that achieved comparable performance at roughly a tenth of the training costs. Comparable performance for a fraction of what Meta or really anyone was spending at the time. And really, the entire industry saw the numbers and the reaction was immediate. If a relatively small Chinese lab that nobody has heard of could match Meta's best work with dramatically fewer resources, well, what exactly was all that spending actually buying? And inside Meta, the reaction was worse. Reports emerged that engineers were pulled into internal war rooms, dissecting DeepSeek's architecture, trying to understand how they'd been outmaneuvered. It was a make it or break it moment for Meta, to say the least. After Llama 3.3, which was released last year, people were already wanting to see what Meta would release for Llama 4. And at this point, the pressure to ship Llama 4 became immense. This wasn't just about open source anymore. This was about justifying the billions that Meta has spent on AI infrastructure, the data centers, the GPU clusters, the thousands of researchers that were hired to make this come to life. Zuckerberg was already looking for answers outside of his own walls. For months, he'd been meeting privately with Alexander Wang, the 28-year-old MIT dropout who'd built Scale AI into the backbone of data labeling for nearly every major AI lab. OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, all of them depended on Scale's infrastructure. Wang had become the youngest self-made billionaire in the world by treating AI data as a first-class problem, essentially. Zuckerberg trusted his judgment, and he was starting to think that he needed Wang inside Meta. But first, Llama 4 had to ship, and somewhere inside Meta's Fair division, a 65-year-old Turing Award winner named Yann LeCun was watching all of this unfold. He'd been at the company for over a decade. He'd helped build the research culture that made Llama possible. And he had ideas, big ideas, about something called world models, AI systems that learn from physical reality, not just text. The kind of research that might matter 5 or 10 years from now, or maybe less. But Zuckerberg didn't want 5 or 10 years from now. He wanted Llama 4 yesterday. LeCun saw the teams around him stop experimenting, stop taking risks, start going with approaches that were safe and proven, the kinds of things that ships on deadlines but doesn't really push the frontier, at least in terms of research. Saturday, April 5th, 2025. An unusual day for a major product launch. Most companies announce on Tuesday mornings. They coordinate press embargoes, they line up blog posts and partner quotes. Meta just dropped Llama 4 on a Saturday with no warning, no press cycle, just here it is. And it was 3 models, all using the new mixture of experts architecture. First, we had Llama 4 Scout, 109 billion parameters with 17 billion active parameters. Llama 4 Maverick, a 400 billion parameter model with 17 billion active parameters. And Llama 4 Behemoth, a 2 trillion parameter model with 288 billion active parameters. The one that was supposed to prove the billions was worth it. But Behemoth was missing, still in training at the time. Remember that. Meta's claims were bold. Maverick beats GPT-4o, rivals DeepSeek v3, Scout outperforms Gemma 3 and Mistral 3.1 across the board. And Scout's context window, 10 million tokens. That's like putting over 85 books into a context window. The community rushed to download and test. This is what open source does. You don't take anyone's word for it, you verify it on your own. And almost immediately, that's when the cracks appeared. One developer ran Maverick through Aider Polyglot, a community-run coding benchmark, not an official industry standard, but widely used by developers to stress test real-world coding ability, especially in the pre-agent era. 225 tasks. Maverick's score came back 16%. For context, models like DeepSeek v3 and Claude 3.7 Sonnet, at the time, the very competitors that Meta claimed to be beating were scoring significantly higher. 16% is not beating GPT-4o. It's not even beating me. Another researcher tested Scout's 10 million token context window. The results degraded sharply past 256,000 tokens because that's as far as the model was actually trained for, apparently. The number on the marketing page was technically achievable, but practically is misleading. Then someone pulled up the Llama leaderboard, a popular site where humans compare AI models head-to-head and vote on which response they prefer. Maverick was sitting at number 2 in the entire world, right behind Gemini, ahead of everything from OpenAI and Anthropic. Incredible, but the model name read Llama 4 Maverick 0326 Experimental. Nathan Lambert, a prominent AI researcher at the Allen Institute for AI, dug into the fine print on Meta's own download page. The version of Maverick submitted to Llama wasn't the model they released to the public. It was an experimental chat version that had been specifically optimized for conversation, the exact quality that tends to win human preference votes. So Meta submitted a specially tuned model designed to charm human voters on the leaderboard, a model nobody could actually download and use. And they compared it against publicly available competitors. Yeah, that's exactly what they did. Lambert called the benchmark comparison fake, and fair enough. Then an anonymous post appeared on a Chinese tech forum, claiming insiders had blended benchmark test sets during post-training, essentially training the model on data that overlapped with what it would be evaluated on. Unverified, but it matched what everyone was saying and already seeing with their own eyes. And Meta's response didn't really help. Their Gen AI head pointed to inconsistent performance across inference platforms and asked for their patience. They denied training on test sets, but they didn't release a technical paper, something that every previous Llama release had included. There's no methodology or training details in this one. And so for the first time, the community was being asked to trust Meta without receipts. The community fallout was playing out in public. But inside Meta, a different kind of reckoning was already underway. Zuckerberg had watched the launch crater in real time. The leaderboard controversy, the developer backlash, the allegations that were happening on the anonymous forums. And his first instinct wasn't to fix this team, but instead to replace it. 4 days before the Llama 4 launch, Joelle Penu, Meta's VP of Research for AI, a key figure, was one of the first to go. Within weeks, she'd posted her departure on LinkedIn with nothing but admiration and deep gratitude for each of my managers. The kind of graceful exit that says more in what it doesn't say than what it does say. At least that's my interpretation of it. Zuckerberg effectively sidelined the entire Gen AI organization team that had built every version of Llama. The team that had earned 1 billion downloads and made Meta the most important company in open source AI. And in their place, he bet everything on the person he'd been courting for months. Meta spent $14.3 billion to invest in Scale AI and hired Alexander Wang as its first ever chief AI officer, leading a brand new division, Meta Superintelligence Labs. In their super aggressive strategy to reinvent themselves, they started offering deals to top researchers at OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, as well as other places. Allegedly, with the pay, stock bonus, and equity, some of the deals could have went up to $100 million. Wang moved fast. He built a 100-person lab in his first 60 days, and when he spoke publicly about what he was building, his ambition was clear.
Our vision is personal superintelligence, AI that knows you, your goals, your interests, and helps you with whatever you're focused on doing. It serves you, whoever you are, wherever you are.
He wasn't just filling seats or chasing benchmarks. He was trying to redefine what Meta AI was actually for. But let's be real here, the job was close to impossible. He was replacing a Turing Award winner, inheriting the fallout of a launch that had torched the company's credibility. And the person whose seat he was taking hadn't even left yet. Wang joined Meta in June of 2025, and for 5 months, he and LeCun existed inside the same company, one building the future that Zuckerberg wanted, and the other watching the future he built get left behind. For months, LeCun had been watching the reorganization happen around him. Wang was technically his new manager.
The person who appears to be trying to fill your shoes in at Meta, Alex Wang, do you have any thoughts or anything about how that will play out for Meta?
He's not in my shoes at all. He's in charge of all the R&D and product that are AI related at Meta. Not a researcher or scientist or anything like that. It's more kind of, overseeing the entire operation. So within Meta Superintelligence Lab, which is his organization, there are 4 divisions, if you want. So one of them is FAIR, which is long-term research. And one of them is TBD Lab, which is basically building frontier models, entirely LLM-focused, AI infrastructure, software infrastructure. And then the last one is products. So those are 4 divisions. He oversees all of that. I really have a long-term view. And basically, I'm going to be at Meta for another 3 weeks. Okay, So FAIR is being pushed towards kind of working on slightly shorter-term projects that it has done in the traditionally, with less emphasis on publication, more focus on sort of helping TBD Lab with the LLMs and frontier models, and less publication, which means Meta is becoming a little more close.
You don't tell a researcher what to do. You certainly don't tell a researcher like me what to do. Now, to understand what LeCun was losing, you have to understand what he built in the first place. FAIR wasn't just a corporate research lab. Under LeCun, it had become one of the most respected AI research institutions in the world, a place where scientists published openly, shared breakthroughs with the community, and worked on problems that might not pay off for a decade, but still did it anyway. And that culture of patient foundational research was LeCun's life's work at Meta. It's what attracted top-tier talent, and it's what made Llama possible in the first place. But now he was watching it get dismantled in favor of speed. He championed world models, AI systems that develop an internal understanding of physical reality that can simulate cause and effect, that learn the way humans actually learn. Not from text, from experience. It was exactly the kind of long-term foundational work that FAIR was built for, and Zuckerberg had shown interest in the idea. But when it came time to allocate resources, the money went to large language models, to the Meta Superintelligence Labs, to the new hires who, in LeCun's view, were entirely fixated on scaling models and nothing else. And while Meta and the whole world were going all in on these large language models, LeCun believed that they were dead end for superintelligence.
LLMs don't have any notion of the underlying reality. And so their understanding is relatively superficial. They don't really have common sense in the way that we understand it. They're useful, there's no question. They're great tools. There's been generation after generation of AI scientists since the 1950s claiming that the technique that they just discovered was going to be the ticket for human-level intelligence. Marvin Minsky, Newell and Simon, Frank Rosenblatt, who invented the perceptron, the first learning machine in the 1950s, saying within 10 years we'll have machines that are as smart as humans. They were all wrong. this generation with LLM is also wrong. I've seen 3 of those generations in my lifetime. It's just another example of being fooled. You're never going to have a robot driven by LLMs.
In November of 2025, he left, and then he sat down with the Financial Times and told the world what he saw on his way out. And by this point, LeCun was already building a competing venture, Advanced Machine Intelligence Labs. Focused on the world models Meta had chosen not to prioritize. He was not a disinterested observer. He was a man with a decade of frustration, a competing thesis about the future of AI, and a startup to fund. Everything he said needs to be understood through that lens. But what he said also lined up with everything the community had already documented, basically, about the whole Llama 4 launch. On the benchmarks, he confirmed it. The results were fudged a little bit. The team used different models for different benchmarks to give better results. Zuckerberg said that he was really upset and basically lost confidence in everyone who was involved. He basically sidelined the entire Gen A organization. And on what went wrong, we had a lot of new ideas and really cool stuff that they should implement, but they were just going for things that were essentially safe and proved. When you do this, you fall behind. And on the whole talent exodus, a lot of people have left. A lot of people who haven't left yet will leave. And on Wang, well, LeCun described him as young and inexperienced, with no background in how research actually works or what would be attractive or repulsive to a researcher. Now, was he right or was he bitter? Well, probably both. But that's the thing about inside sources. The people who know the most are never the ones with the least at stake. But the core facts that he described, the fudged benchmarks, the sidelined team, the departures, none of that was disputed. Not by Meta, not by anyone. Meta didn't just build good models. They built trust. 2 years of shipping open weight models, earning the loyalty of millions of developers worldwide, becoming the counterweight to the OpenAI's closed approach. That trust was Meta's real product. Not the weights or the benchmarks. It was the trust of the developer community. And they destroyed it in a weekend. Not because Llama 4 was bad. It really wasn't that bad. The models, once properly deployed, actually performed reasonably well on some independent benchmarks. The irony is that later that year, OpenAI would release gpt-oss 20 billion and gpt-oss 120 billion, 2 open source models that to this day are still considered incredible models in the open source model landscape. The problem was that when the pressure hit, when DeepSeek embarrassed them and the deadline loomed, they chose optics over honesty. They submitted a secret model to a public leaderboard. They published claims they couldn't back up, and they skipped the technical paper that every previous release had included. And when they got caught, they didn't really come clean. A departing Turing Award winner had to do it for them in a newspaper interview months and months later. And meanwhile, the open source AI landscape kept moving. DeepSeek kept shipping. Alibaba's Qwen models kept improving. Mistral in France kept pushing boundaries. Meta isn't the only open game in town anymore. The developers who would have defaulted to Llama, well, they have options now, and much better ones. As of now, LeCun is fundraising for his world models startup. Wang is hiring, talking about personal superintelligence and building out the lab that he believes will define the next era of AI. The engineers who built every version of Llama, the ones who earned that billion downloads, are, well, scattered across the industry. And Behemoth, the flagship model that was supposed to be Meta's masterpiece, it still hasn't shipped. The model that was supposed to redeem the story, become the story's most fitting symbol, it's not there. It's announced with fanfare, but never delivered. Meta's whole philosophy was, we're different, we're open, we give it away because we believe in the community. That was the pitch. That's what made the developer community fall in love with them in the first place. But when they needed to be honest about what Llama 4 could actually do, they chose the marketing slide over the truth. They did exactly what every closed AI company gets accused of doing. They just did it while claiming to be the open ones. The classic original motto, move fast and break things. Well, with Llama 4, they moved fast and broke themselves. If you want to learn more about the open source AI space, what's actually working, who's building what, and where this all goes next, make sure you subscribe. I'll leave all the sources in the description that I use for this video. And if there's one takeaway from the story, it's this. In open source, the code is free, but the trust, that's the most expensive thing that you can lose. Can't really buy that back. Thanks for watching.